But then the word came immediately that we were being attacked. It was Sergeant Lee, who was later killed. He told us to get down, and we saw movements in front of us. And I opened fire immediately. I was possibly one of the first to open fire.
And firing went on, in fact, for well over an hour. A number of the Irish were killed, and a number of the other troops too. But the awful irony of this was that the troops who had opened fire on the Irish were, of course, Franco troops. In other words, fighting on the same side.
Surely that must have taken the guts out of you all to some extent.
Not really, but it did make us aware of the risks.
2 Irishmen died in the action and others were wounded. An inquiry found the other troops, a Franco Bandera from the Canary Islands, to blame. The action took some heart out of the Irish, but for the next few weeks they settled in around the old village of Ciempozuelos and learned to live with the shelling from the Republican lines 2 miles away. These railway buildings here were part of the Irish outposts in front of Ciempozuelos when O'Duffy's men were first put into the line. In fact, where I'm standing now was part of that line, and the job was to protect this little town just over here. And it was from these positions, from trenches all along here, that they made their one and only offensive action of the war. They were ordered out into these plains over here to take a small town called Tutulcia 3 miles away. And they left the dugouts under very heavy artillery fire. In fact, they didn't get very far. The artillery pinned them down, and eventually they were ordered to retreat. But before they retreated, they had lost 4 men, including Sergeant Major Gabriel Lee of Dublin, who was killed down there where wheat and maize and millet now grows.
He unfortunately fell forward when we had this barrage, and I was with him at the time and fell on top of him. And when it was over, I sat up and he didn't. By a most peculiar circumstance, the bayonet was taken from his scabbard and it cut the back of his thigh as if you would cut a steak. And how it got out of his scabbard and did that, I don't know, because I was on top of him. So he was bleeding very, very badly. I had a pair of rosary beads in my pocket, which my father had given me. I gave them to him, and he clasped them, and he spoke a few words to me. Daniel Bergen, was one of the stretcher bearers, and he came along with his companion, and they took him away on a stretcher. Brave, courageous stretcher bearers they were. And they took him away to the hospital away behind where they could go, and he died there.
Later on, they moved up the line to La Marinosa, nearer Madrid, and it was there they remained until their return to Ireland in May of that year. Captain Pádraig Quinn, who was second in command of O'Duffy's brigade, is surrounded in his home by reminders of Irish history and his Christian faith, and of his Spanish experience. After Ciempozuelos, there was some disagreement about the role of the brigade, and a number of the men wanted to come back to Ireland. Pádraig Quinn was not one of those. According to him, O'Duffy had decided on a defensive role for the Bandera in Spain.
Did you regret that decision? Would you have preferred to have taken a more active role?
Yes, some of us did resent it, because there was plenty of engagements there we knew on our right and left that we should have been in, and would have it would have painted a much better picture for the Bandera.
No, I don't think we were mainly a defensive role. We took part as a mainly defensive role because we advanced on certain points during the engagement there. It was just the positions we occupied that made it appear that way, in my opinion.
Well, I have a suspicion that when General Duffy sent us out there and saw the grave dangers to which we were being subjected, that if we were to come into conflict with the Reds to a closer degree, that maybe we would have suffered very severe casualties, and he might have felt that this country would hold him responsible for that.
At the end of May, the Bandera left for Ireland, leaving behind them a dozen dead, 7 of them killed in battle, and now buried in the vaults at Castlereagh Cemetery, their names often incorrectly spelt. They lie in company with hundreds of Moorish cavalrymen of Franco's Army of Africa. Back in Ireland, O'Duffy's summary of the Spanish adventure was that his brigade did not, because it could not, play a very prominent part in the war.
But we ensured that our country was represented in the fight against world communism. Our volunteers were not mere adventurers. Over 90% of them were true crusaders. We've been criticized, sneered at, slandered, but truth, charity, and justice shall prevail, and time will justify our motives. We seek no praise. We did our duty. We went to Spain.
Well, I think, as a matter of fact, I think if they wanted to go to Spain to fight for what they believed in, there were some religious people who thought they had to go there and fight for their religion. There were some people who were fascists and wanted to fight for fascism. I think they had a right to do so. But one thing I strongly object to is that they used the title of the Irish Brigade and the Wild Geese. Because the Irish Brigade and the Wild Geese, in the first place, they weren't mercenaries. They had causes, a cause which they fought for, an enemy which they hated, and that's why they fought. And when they got there to fight, they fought. They fought and they died. See, on far foreign fields from Dunkirk to Belgrade lie the warriors and chiefs of the Irish Brigades. And I think that if Ireland is looking for warriors and chiefs who died on the foreign fields of Spain, she can look to people like Peter Daly, Kit Conway, Jack Nalty, and Paddy Sullivan. Those were the chiefs.
And not O'Duffy's blue shirt.
And not O'Duffy's blue shirt. And if you want the warriors who didn't claim to be chiefs, they're all over Spain, buried. The graves are buried they're buried in graves all over Spain. And I think if Ireland is going to consider that she had an Irish brigade there, that she had wild geese there, the title belongs to the Republican side, not to Duffy's men.
Irishmen were still fighting and dying in Spain with the International Brigade. They fought and died at Brunete, in the Aragon where Frank Ryan was captured, at Belchite and Quinto and Teruel as the battles continued across the land. And they were to die on the Ebro in the last big action involving the International Brigade. The Ebro was a final desperate attempt to gain ground for the battered Republic, and at first it looked as if it would succeed. Again, the fighting was fierce. Of the International Brigade men who crossed the Ebro, 75% fell. And for some of them, the Ebro was a first taste of battle.
Everybody suffers some, I did anyway, from being scared stiff. And the sort of the first impression was the cracking of the bullets like whips actually near my ears, then the artillery barrage and so on. And I think for each person it's an individual coming to terms with the reality of the battle, and everybody comes to terms, I think, in their own way and in a different way.
A monument rises out of the River Ebro to commemorate one of the last great battles of the war. And here, another monument. This one marks General Franco's command post near the town of Gandesa. It was a battle in which 150,000 men died, and that included about a dozen Irishmen. But it wasn't just a battle of a river, the Battle of the River Ebro. It was a battle of valleys, of hills, of mountain peaks. And this particular peak over here became quite notorious. This is the infamous hill 481.
We called it the Pimple because of the construction of the hill itself, and for 7 days and 7 nights we were on the hill opposite 481, and used to have to go run down the hill, up the valley and attack 481. which was in a commanding position, heavily fortified. And if we had one anti-tank gun, it would have been possible actually to knock out that hill. But not having any anti-tank guns, we were depending upon the Maxim machine guns and our own rifles as such to try, and grenades to try and take it. So on August the 1st, 1938, bank holiday by the way at that time, it was actually the bank holiday. It was a very warm day, at least in 481 anyway. I was wounded in the last attack, and then we were drawn because it was reckoned it was impossible to take the position with riflemen and machine guns.
Men had come from 29 different countries to fight in the international brigades. They had fought on all fronts, and their casualties were appalling. They had seen their friends die and had killed in battle themselves. They had seen and done things which they would never forget.
The war did something to me that perhaps had a bad effect in a way personally. For instance, it blunts, no matter how good the cause you're fighting on, it blunts your sensibility, it blunts your feelings of indignation against injustice and so on. And I had come to be indifferent or have a be callous about casualties beside me, comrades that I could survive it, and kind of indifferent even to my own survival. This is very bad, and I've carried ever since an abhorrence of war. Probably the most abiding memory is the faces of people, of 5 men I killed who had attacked our position with hand grenades, and I had thrown hand grenades at them, and while one of the hand grenades was at the foot of one of the fascists, I could see their faces so clearly. Then handsome young fellows who might be just like any of our own Spanish lads. Then the explosion, and as I threw the second hand grenade, and they were no longer there.
There's something I'd like to point out here, because I think it's very important as far as Spain and the International Brigade is concerned, you see. At this time, the Spaniards were actually moving Spanish troops into the international brigades to reinforce them. It's getting very difficult to get them from abroad. And if you see the real role of the international brigade, which was not just fighting, they fought, there's no hand fought hard. They had a special role in Spain, the international brigade, and of course the Irish with them. But this was their real role there, that the Spanish